Hi everybody, this is week 2 in our course Marketing 441, and the purpose of this video is just to give you a little bit of an overview of what you are going to be doing for the next 7 days. So the course always has certain learning outcomes for each course. These are things that hopefully you will learn through your work this week in the course. And I'm not going to read all these to you. These are all in your week 2 weekly materials folder. But these are hopefully the outcomes you will receive the next 7 days. And they are all going to come either from the discussion board or from the individual case assignment that you have. So let's look more specifically at what you're going to be doing. You're going to be reading 2 chapters, chapter 2 and chapter 3. So chapter 2 is about marketing research. So in marketing, we do research to help us make better decisions. So it's not just to know more things, to gain knowledge, but those are important, but to gain knowledge to help us make better decisions. Should we introduce a new product? Should we change the pricing? Should we open a new office? Should we do this or that? We do research to help us make those decisions. So the chapter 2 talks about the marketing research process, normally the steps we go through, and then it talks about what are called marketing information systems. So these are basically computer systems, databases that of various kinds of information that will collect information all in one point, and then we use that information to help us make predictions about what customers are going to want. So this customer, based on all this demographic information, plus what they bought from us before, if we compare them to other customers kind of like them, what do we predict they want from us at this point? And so that's a marketing information system. And in smaller companies, this is kind of done informally, kind of an ad hoc basis, maybe just talking to customers. But in bigger companies, there are maybe marketing research departments, or a lot of big companies will hire outside research firms to help them to do things like focus groups and customer surveys and social media analysis and on and on. So chapter 2 is just a little overview of marketing research. Chapter 3 is about consumer behavior. Now, I believe that you all, at least some of you, took the consumer behavior course here at Davenport. So this is a big course. Please don't think that chapter 3 covers everything, but consumer behavior is basically the science of trying to understand how consumers shop and how they make decisions about what to buy and what not to buy. And I said the word science, it wants to be a hard science like chemistry or physics, but it's probably kind of a combination of art and science. We humans are very complicated. We're much more complicated than, atoms or plants or dogs or something like that. So chapter 3 looks at things like social influences on our decision making, marketing influences, how marketing influences what we buy and don't buy, situational influences, psychology, some things that come from within us, as compared to influences from our friends or the media, and then the consumer decision-making process. And it's important that we understand the process that consumers go through when they're going to buy something. Now, if you're buying a house or a car, maybe you consciously think about all those steps. If you're buying a candy bar, you're not consciously thinking, okay, now I'm gathering information. Now I'm considering my alternatives. But you are doing it. You're just doing it very rapidly, and you're doing it on kind of a subconscious level. So that's some of what you will cover in chapter 3. So you have 2 assignments this week. The first is a discussion board, and by now hopefully you have an idea of how discussion boards work in here. You have 2 questions. You will answer 1 question by day 3. You're welcome to answer both, but you have to answer one of the 2 questions. So question 1 is about test markets. Test markets, we don't typically, especially for a big national company, we don't introduce a product and just roll it out everywhere all at once. We test it in Grand Rapids, or we test it in Albuquerque or Bangor, Maine, or someplace like that, or a few places first, and see what people think, what sales are like, and then that we make decisions. So question 1 is about test markets. Question 2, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Chapter 2 is about marketing research, and you're identifying secondary research options, and then telling us about 2 of those secondary research options. So pick one of those, answer by day 3. Then by day 6, post replies to people who answered the other question. And this basically this gives you exposure to both questions. So answer one question by day 3. By day 6, go and post replies to at least 2 replies to the other question. All right, your individual cases due this week. This is about Facebook. This is a new case. In the past, the case was about Apple. We have a brand new one about Facebook now. Should be kind of fun. So you can see the learning outcomes from this case. I'm not going to read these. These are all in kind of in your instructions for this assignment. What you need to do is read the case about Facebook, and it is in your week 2 folder. So let me show you what it looks like here. It is a PDF. Looks like this, and it's 40 pages long. One of the things you have to learn, especially as an upper level student, is when you're confronted with tons of information, how do you figure out what's important and what can be left aside? So you've got lots of background, you've got lots of data, you will not struggle for information here. But part of being a business person these days is sorting through a lot of information fairly quickly and deciding what's important and what's not. So here's your case. It's about Facebook in 2015, at which time the company was hugely successful, as it still is today. But it, like any company, it faced some problems it faced just from being so big and powerful. So if you're familiar with Sheryl Sandberg, there's a lot about Sheryl Sandberg in this case. So there are questions in this case, but this assignment, you are not answering those questions. Okay, you are using this case to follow the 8-step model from the American Management Association, and I think that you've used this model in previous courses. I know one of my courses uses it. So here are the instructions that are also in the week 2 folder, and it basically goes through the steps that you follow. So I have kind of summarized these steps on the next PowerPoint slide here. So just a second, I might have to sneeze, so I apologize if I have to sneeze for a second. That won't be very professional. But I would like to not re-record this. So excuse me, step 1 is you are going to review the case. So step 1 is just a brief summary of the case. 40 pages, so please do not summarize the whole case. In a couple paragraphs, summarize what you think is kind of the essence of the case. That's step 1. Step 2 is to identify the root problem. So the chapter identifies some different problems, but what do you think is the basic problem going on in this chapter? What's the root problem that everything else is kind of flowing up from? And then step 3 is what are the components of the problem? So dig down, here's the root problem, and then the components, kind of the different pieces of that root problem. You're going to talk about those in step 3. Step 4 is based on what you think the problem is, generate alternatives that might solve that problem. Remember, one alternative is always do nothing. So most cases following this method, your first alternative is take no action, it's not that big of a deal. And then you go on from there and you identify different possible alternatives. And identify as many as you can that are possible. If something is just completely unfeasible, then it's not really an alternative. So here in step 4, you don't go into a lot of detail. You're just identifying this is one option, here's another option, here's another option. Step 5, you're then going back through all the alternatives and you're evaluating them. What are the pros and cons? What are good and bad? Step 5, you are not yet choosing an alternative, but you are discussing the advantages and disadvantages, kind of the feasibility of these different alternatives. Step 6, here's now you choose one of the alternatives. So go back to step 4 and choose one of those alternatives, and just one. Now sometimes you can maybe combine 2, but please don't tell me you're going to use all of them or you're going to use 3 or 4. That's not feasible. 1, maybe a combination of 2 that are obviously connected. And then why? Make a good case for why that is the best alternative. Step 7 is develop an action plan to carry out that alternative. The instructions give some advice. It's nice to kind of say, maybe week by week or month by month, what's going to happen to carry out your alternative, and also who's going to do what. So, what department is going to be responsible for this? What department's going to be responsible for that? Are these departments going to have to work together? Facebook is a vast corporation, so it pretty much is going to have any department you can think of. You could also use outside suppliers, outside partners as part of your action plan. So it's nice to have a table of kind of the action steps and then maybe some paragraphs giving a little bit more detail. And finally, step 8, how are you going to measure the results? In marketing, if we don't measure the outcomes of what we did, we don't really know whether we were successful or not. So you want to describe, few ways that you're going to measure the outcome. And if your alternative, if it cannot be measured, it's probably not the best alternative, because this case wants us to be able to measure and to discuss how we're going to know whether we were successful or not. So that is your case. I believe you have all followed this format here, 8 steps, in at least one previous course, but I suspect probably others. And gosh, that's it. So those are your assignments this week. Read the 2 chapters, participate in the discussion, and your individual case is due. So if I were you, I probably maybe wouldn't do much work on that group case this week. That group assignment, that's going to be due in week 4. So you'll have time in weeks 3 and 4 to focus on that. I mean, if you really want, you can go and talk about it. But I would focus a lot of my attention on the individual Facebook case that is due this week. We're all very familiar with Facebook, whether you use it a lot or not. You probably still know a lot about it. So should be very relevant to your daily life. And just dig in there. Have some fun with this case. And as always, if you have questions, email me first. If it's an emergency, you can call me. And I look forward to working with you. I will see you online.